I'm happy to introduce Advocate Colin Gonsalves. He is a designated senior advocate of the Supreme Court of India and the founder of Human Rights Law Network. He specializes in human rights protection, labor law, and public interest law. He has been awarded Right Livelihood Award for the year 2017 for his tireless and innovative use of public interest litigation over 3 decades to secure fundamental human rights for India's most marginalized and vulnerable citizens. Considered a pioneer in the field of public interest litigation in India, he has brought several cases dealing with economic, social, and cultural rights. Most of these cases decided by the Supreme Court have been set as precedents. Since co-founding HRLN in 1989, Colin Gonsalves and his colleagues have built the organization into India's leading public interest law group working at the intersection of law, advocacy, and policy. He also co-developed the Indian People's Tribunal, IPT, an independent organization headed by retired Supreme Court and High Court judges to investigate human rights violations. Fact findings presented at the IPTs have spurred public interest litigation, formed social movements, and led to concrete policy changes. Mr. Advocate Colin Gonsalves has written, edited, and co-edited numerous articles and books on a range of human rights law issues. And we are happy to have you, sir, with us.
Thank you, Dr. Benita. And we now move over to Advocate Colin Gonsalves. We request you to unmute your mic.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me for this session. I'm filling in for Harsh Mandar, who's fallen ill, unfortunately. But I'm happy to be here in any case. I think we are doing this session at a very important time, on a very important day, because the biggest Rakshas in the world, Donald Trump, has lost his election. And it's going to have wide ramifications for the rest of the world. It's going to have wide ramifications for India. And I hope this is a symbol or a sign that all the evil people who have dominated the world during this last 5 years or so, maybe more, are on their way out. You know, India is almost as if it is in Kala Yuga. The whole of the world is like it is in Kala Yuga. And the forces of evil have been on the rise, and they have controlled and commanded countries and their futures. And the forces of good, in a sense, have been retreating. Many of them are in jail, many of them have been tortured, many killed right across the world and in India. And so for us who are looking for signs of change, who are working tirelessly for change and are looking for signs of change, Donald Trump's bad news for Trump was very good news for us. There was also, today is a very good day, there was a second development which was in India, where Tejashwi Prasad from Bihar suddenly showed up in the polls as playing a very leading role in the results, getting good results in favor of his party. And that was a huge surprise that Nitish Kumar and the BJP should have, hopefully, because these are only poll forecasts, hopefully they would perhaps lose, and a new politics will enter Bihar. Not the politics of corruption, not the politics of caste, not the politics of religion, but the politics of poverty and elimination of poverty, which was what Tejashwi Prasad was focusing on. Migrant workers, the suffering of migrant workers, poverty, lack of schools, lack of hospitals, lack of employment. And he got such an astonishing response that perhaps it may be the sign of a new dawn for this country, where people will not focus anymore while campaigning on the things of the past, on religion, on caste, on status, you know, and get back to what are really the essential elements of change in India, which is elimination of poverty, elimination of hunger, elimination of violence, peace instead of hatred. So I hope the BR election symbolizes what is going to come in India. So it's a very good day. Like I said, we are in the period of Kali Yuga for quite some time. And we have never seen such a change in India where hatred has replaced peace, where poverty has accentuated. We have some of the largest reserves of food grains in the world, and yet right across the country, hunger deaths are being reported. So the situation has become so bad that sometimes how the thought of how to get out of this system is perplexing. We went through some of the most exciting challenges to the government on the CAA and the NRC. Most of you read in the papers and most of you must have discussed that. And it circled around the identification of 500,000 Muslims as being illegal immigrants in the state of Assam. Hindus as well, other communities as well, but a block of 500,000 Muslims were identified as having come into India illegally. Not last month, not last year, but something like 40 years ago. So you're in Assam, you've got your families, you've got your children, you've got your government job, you have a shop, you have agricultural land, and 40 years later, the government tells you, oh, we're going to do a study as to when you came. Did you come post 1971 or before 1971? And you're asked to produce documents which rickshaw pullers and agricultural workers and casual workers and so on are unable to produce. And so you're declared as a foreigner. Now, 500 persons, so you say they are foreigners. So what do you want to do? And the government tells us we're going to deport them. And before we deport them, we will incarcerate them in detention centers and deport them. But you will deport them where? The government says we'll deport them to the country from which they came, which is Bangladesh. Bangladesh says these are not our citizens. I'm sorry, we're not able to take a single one of them because we don't accept that they are citizens of Bangladesh. So what happens? They become stateless persons. And statelessness is covered by a UN Convention on Statelessness, which says no government, no nation, no state shall ever create statelessness. That is to say, no government will take a step which will render a person without a national identity. So all these persons, these 500,000 Muslims, they had a national identity. They were Indians. They were voting in the elections. They had passports. They had all kinds of identification cards. They had ration cards. And the government now says we're going to scrap all this because you are a foreigner and now you are a stateless person. And in response to that, and it was quite a astonishing stand for the government of India to take, but not astonishing really if you understand that the government of India is really based on hate, division, anger, violence, just like Donald Trump really. And so the government of India took the extraordinary stand that we're going to render them stateless and try and deport them with the use of force if necessary, but we'll deport them. In response to that, what a wonderful movement grew throughout the country. Many of you would have seen the agitations, not restricted to Assam at all, spread right across India. And this is a very important point to note because it's the sign of a new India. that we are not going to take things lightly. We're not going to listen to a person, a prime minister or a president or this or that, who tells people you must think like this, you must act like this. No. Like the Americans, they rose in anger against Trump. They mobilized right across the country. Blacks, whites, Latinos, transgender persons, gays, straights, everyone came together and showed Donald Trump the door. India is also matured like that. We don't see the full signs of it as yet. It's all under the ground, so to speak. But India is also maturing. And a magnificent struggle started, and you must recognize the importance of that struggle. Millions of people came out on the streets. Millions of persons marched. All the marches were peaceful. And what did the governments do? They were taken aback. They never realized that an issue like this would cause such a reaction, not just by Muslims, but by Hindus as well. You see, when the majority section itself says, Mr. Prime Minister, you can't speak for us. We are Hindu, but you can't speak for us because we don't agree with your brand of Hinduism. Oh my God, that's a very frightening thing for this government. Because this government's politics, and very effective politics, the BJP was a masterful election strategist, mobilizing the majority vote into a solid bloc, so that no matter what happens, no matter demonetization, poverty, COVID, the bloc stays together. The bloc suffers. Individuals in the bloc suffer tremendously. Unemployment, no wages, homelessness. But the bloc stays together and votes together, so no matter what happens, the party wins. But perhaps, like yesterday's developments in Bihar, like the CAA agitation before that, maybe you can't take that bloc for granted anymore. And maybe Indians will stop thinking in terms of their religion only, religion, caste, and think in terms of India. Think in terms of their own well-being. Say my human rights and the human rights of my colleague matter more than caste, matter more than religion. Welfare, well-being, peace matters more than anything else. And a magnificent movement started, which was met with repression. And I'll give you an example of the state of Uttar Pradesh, where they had CCTV cameras capturing the marches as they took place, identifying people in the marches, and then filing criminal cases against them. So repression follows the expression of democratic rights. When you get into democratic rights and you struggle for rights, it's a different piece of action altogether. As long as you're on the sidelines and watching and commenting and discussing and having seminars and workshops, the forces of evil, the forces of oppression don't care. Go ahead, do what you want. But the moment you go into the streets and the moment you agitate, the moment you protest, then the forces that govern this country unleash terrible oppression on you. And that's a very important question for all of you to consider today. What is our role? What are we going to do? When we see so much repression around us, must we change our ways? Must we become more, I'm using this word deliberately, aggressive? Must we become more assertive? Must we take a little departure from our normal ways of living in the world? Many of you, I suspect, are working actively in communities right across the country, perhaps. And you will see oppression, you will work in rural areas, you will work with the oppressed, you'll work with the poor, and you'll see that oppression growing and growing and growing. And the question you must ask yourself in the days that we see ahead for us, What is it going to be like tomorrow? What is it going to be like the next year? And am I going to continue in the same way, or will I take note of the terrible repression all around me and make my work much more meaningful, much more, let's say, intolerant of injustice? And will I fight in the true sense of the word? On the CAA NRC, I'll mention the Delhi riots which took place. Terrible riots where the victims were put in jail, and the victims are in jail. And the young students of Jamia and Aligarh Muslim University and so on, who fought against the Delhi riots, are in jail because the police made allegations against them, filed charge sheets, and put them in jail. And the ministers of the government who said, and they were caught on video saying this, can you imagine a state minister and a former member of parliament and so on? Desh ke gaddaro ko goli maro salo. It's a hate crime. Please remember, when you see on television anything, or if a person in the area is giving a speech and somebody videographs that speech, and it speaks for violence to be unleashed against a person on the basis of religion and community, it's a very serious criminal offense. And if you have a video of that and you give it to me or you give it to some of my colleagues, we can take that video and file a case against the person making the speech. And why is it important to do? As we did for these ministers, state ministers, we filed a case against them in the High Court, which is now going on. And we want a day to come where we see that these ministers are put behind bars. But it's very important to do because hate speech is permeating the country. And hate speech spreads because nobody stands up and says, stop. You see, the persons doing hate speech are actually cowards at heart. They like to hide behind their computer. They like to send things off. They like to, think that they have political support and so on. But the moment an individual, better still, the moment a group of people stand up and say, stop, and files an FIR against them and goes to court, fights against them, these persons who are really cowards at heart show that they have really no backbone, no spine, and no courage. Now I want to go to terrorism and sedition and the second issue that concerns us. And every day in the newspapers, you'll hear a terrorist here, terrorist caught here, terrorist caught here, and so on. And you also know that some of our finest human rights lawyers are in jail today. Sudha Bharadwaj and others, 8 or 10 people, some of our finest lawyers who fought for tribal rights in the jungles and, in the forests, fought for labor rights, fought for criminal justice, are in jail today, and they've been in jail for 2 years. Can you imagine? My colleagues, my friends, people who I admire, people who I know for decades are in jail. And what for? What for? For organizing people in a rather cohesive fashion, right? We don't organize people to do, some seminar or workshop. We organize people, we tell them about their rights. And why do we do it? We do it because we want them to mobilize, agitate, and resist terror in India. Make no mistake about this. The biggest terrorist in the country is the state. And the biggest group of terrorists in this country is the Indian police. No institution and no group of people exert such terror on ordinary people in ordinary things, from the registration of an FIR and so on, as these institutions do. Absolute terror. You know, I don't need to tell you, torture is widespread. And in the areas where you work, you'll come across so many instances, particularly if you're in a rural area or a tribal area or a place where Dalits are predominant. You get so many stories of violence against people, false arrests, unnecessary arrests, people languishing in jail in states like Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, languishing in jail for years without proper legal aid. Make no mistake about it, and don't be afraid to say it if you think it's right, that the state exerts the greatest amount of terror on its people. And it keeps people in a perpetual state of fear. Perpetual state of fear. And if you saw some of the rallying taking place in America last night and this morning, and the speeches were, we want to move from a situation of hate and violence and discrimination and division to a situation of peace and love. Love. The greatest good. The greatest thing that we can aspire to in our country as well. And the police and the governments and politicians create such hatred and fear, fear most of all. In my work as a lawyer, I see that most of all. Look at the sedition cases. I want to ask you, suppose I say I hate this government and I hate this leader of this government. And I hope one day he'll be caught for all the crimes he has committed and be put in jail. Is that sedition? I hate this government. I hate this leader. He should be put in jail. Is it sedition? Sounds like it, right? In any part of the country, you ask people, say yes. And you must know what sedition is, because everyone is threatened with sedition these days. In the British period, sedition was saying things against the crown. So if you're having dinner and you say this king is a real idiot, I wish we could do away with him and have somebody else. Just gossip over a glass of wine. That would be sedition. And if anyone ratted on you, you would be taken to the king and you'd be sentenced to death for saying things against the crown. But in India, the law changed because of a judgment of the Supreme Court in Kedarnath's case, which basically says, not only do you need sharp and fiery words, but you need equally sharp and fiery actions. Words to overthrow the state coupled with actions to overthrow the state. Throwing bombs, firing AK-47s, blowing up railway tracks, etc., etc. Absent the action, there is no sedition. So you might have heard you had people who were drawing cartoons of a politician, cartoons of a particular kind, arrested for sedition. In Uttarakhand, I saw posters which said, Inqilab Zindabad, we must organize. They were pulled down and the persons who put up the posters were taken for sedition, for saying things. And there were two important cases, one from Kashmir and one from Punjab. The Punjab case was, a person came out on the streets in Amritsar and said, Khalistan Zindabad. I want a separate state for the Sikhs. Brothers and sisters, let us get arms and mobilize and fight for an independent Sikh state. Now that sounds pretty seditious, isn't it? Words. So when the matter came to the Supreme Court judge said, this is all fine. He said this. He admits saying this, and you've got a tape recording of it. But Mr. Prosecutor, what I want to ask you is, after he said all this, did he do anything? No, my lord, he didn't do anything, but this is sedition. And the court acquitted him because there was no action to overthrow the state. And action means not just, in a small city on a small road, you shout some slogans and so on. No, action means you make strenuous attempts to get large number of people together to overthrow the government and overthrow the state. And the same case from Kashmir, where somebody said Azadi, and let's get guns and get Azadi for people from Kashmir, a solitary person. And the court acquitted because there's no sedition. So remember this. Fiery words, no matter how fiery. Those of you who are from Kerala, there was Nambudri Pad who many years ago said, we must get rid of capitalism and bring in socialism by an armed revolution. Not sedition. Because you said armed revolution, but what Nambudri Pad and the CPM basically meant was that you must mobilize and organize and have, get your party strong, win elections and so on and so forth. So sedition was a way in which they put the fear of God into people. The third issue I want to talk about, which confronts us today, is hunger and poverty. Till a year ago, India boasted of a gross domestic product, GDP, of 7%, one of the largest in the world, if not the largest, highest GDP growth. So India was once upon a time an Asian tiger. Now, then it became a global tiger. It became a leading economic power. And yet, with a 7% GDP, India has today 70% of the population, or 850 million people, 800 million people say, below a poverty line of $2 a day, living in perpetual hunger. All this you know because you work with the poor, so all this you know. With a large percentage of children stunted, shrunken bodies, stunted brains, stunted bodies, shrunken brains. And the majority of women anemic and weak. 70 million tons of grain lying in the granaries of India, like some kind of buffer stock, which never gets into the stomachs of people, but are always kept in the granaries. So hunger is not a natural thing for India. We are a poor country, we are a developing country, blah, blah, blah. Hunger is created. And hunger is created by the state. And hunger is created by the state. Shall I tell you why? Because we have moved from social democracy to globalization. During the period of social democracy, that is to say up to the 90s, the perspective was to take all the people of the country along with you. And from the wealth of the nation, a certain bit trickles down to the poor, so you try as best as you can, so that poor and rich alike move forward together. Not a very good practice, this trickle-down theory, but let's take it for the time being. And then all along came globalization, and if I were to explain globalization in 3 words, subsidies are bad. So our wonderful Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, who was always very close to the World Bank and capitalist institutions and capitalists generally, he completely took over this thing. He found it a fascinating idea. He had Manmohan and his person in the planning commission. Oh, wonderful. And India implemented a globalization policy more severe than anywhere else in the world. What did it mean? Subsidies are bad means? We're not here to educate people, the state. We should let private institutions flourish and they will educate, and ultimately everyone will get an education. We are not here to run public hospitals. So let's stop our funding for public hospitals slowly and slowly. And let's allow private healthcare hospitals to come up. And we'll make a regulation that the poor also should be treated there. So no need for education for the state, no need for healthcare, no need for food, because we'll allow the corporations, as this is what they're doing today, to take over the land, consolidate the land, have huge machinery like they have in America, huge machinery, and they'll grow food. Why do we need the state to do these things? Our corporations, our industrialists, our capitalists will do the things that the state is doing today. Subsidies are bad. And you know the effect of that, because no capitalist wants to feed the poor free, educate the poor free, treat the poor in hospitals free. And so we saw, as the resources of the state went trickling down to the poor in social democracy, they were funneled up. They were collected and sent up to the rich. So resources went up. On food, we need about 3-4% GDP. We get less than 1%. For healthcare, we need something like 2-3%. We get 0.9%. And so for public housing and so on, for environment and so on. And that's why, my friends, when you go to your hospitals or your healthcare centers and you see the terrible state there, with doctors and nurses missing and equipment missing and blood banks without blood and so on, you can link it to the policy of globalization and the starvation of funds. We will not infuse state funds into these institutions because it is not the business of the state under globalization to do these things. We fund the capitalists, and the capitalists will do all this for us. And so as a result, India has become the hunger capital of the world, where you have more hunger in India than the whole of sub-Saharan Africa put together. Can you imagine? And you must have read in the papers of all the UN reports showing the hunger indexes, from the best countries having no hunger at all to the worst, having severe hunger and malnutrition. And India comes at the bottom of that list virtually. Great India, cultural India, wonderful India, glorious culture, glorious background, glorious history, such wonderful music, such wonderful saris, such wonderful songs, such wonderful ancient forts. Yeah. But ultimately, the picture is of a starving child. And so globalization and capitalism under Congress, and later on under the BJP, turned out to be a very cruel mechanism for killing people, basically. And you know the statistics about how many children die every day, running into several thousands, large number. How many children die every day on account of malnutrition-related incidents, illnesses, and so on. And you know now, during the period of COVID, all the Anganwadis closed in your areas, and we've gone to court to fight for them to be reopened. The midday meal scheme closed in areas, totally across the country. Your midday meal in every state where you are has closed. The Anganwadis have closed. And the 6,000 rupees given to every pregnant woman or lactating mother so that she can eat some food before she gives birth and the baby doesn't die of malnutrition has not been paid by this government, this great government that talks about women and children, for the last 3 years. 6,000 rupees not paid anywhere in the country. So your idea of a killer is a person who throws a bomb or fires a gun and so on. But the biggest killers are politicians and ministers who, by their programs, cause millions of people to wither away, become emaciated, and die. But we never turn to them and say, oh, you're killers. We should have a law which says that anyone who makes a policy or implements a program that causes people to die, there'll be a charge, a specific new charge in the Indian Penal Code, and you'll be arrested and put in jail. No, they live happy lives, they get along. They earn huge amounts of money, but nobody thinks of politicians as killers, but in fact they are. Nobody thinks of governments as killers, but in fact they are. Because the poor die quietly. The poor die quietly, without an assertion of my rights, without a protest, without a whimper, without even a whisper of protest. And they die in large numbers, like flies. And that is the injustice for which anger must rise in our breasts. Anger must rise within us. And we must fight commensurate with, proportionate to the large scale injustice done to the people of India. Now, I know all of us say Mahatma Gandhi, non-violence and all that, we will protest non-violence. And I'm a proponent of non-violence. I don't want to advocate violence at all. But you must know that this myth about Gandhi and non-violence is one of the most widespread and perpetuated myths about the national movement being non-violent. People say our national movement against the British was non-violent. Gandhi was non-violent. And maybe the time has come to do an elementary relook at this proposition. Because our national movement against the British was one of the most violent movements ever. Was one of the most violent movements. Indians across the country picked up homemade bombs, made homemade pistols, used their axes, used their spears, blew up British trains, tried to kill British officers right across the country. Would you have had liberation from the British if we all sat with folded hands, doing dharna outside the collectorate of the British collector? Reality is very different from myths, no? Reality is very different from these stories, happy stories of how in the national movement, Mahatma Gandhi, without shedding a drop of blood, got the British to get out. No. People fought the bloody armed struggle. People lost their lives in millions. And the British realized, we can't hang on to India anymore. These guys are just going for us everywhere. The primitive tribes, the Dalits, the forest dwellers, the agricultural workers, the farmers, everyone's going, mobilizing against the British. And it was only the end which was non-violent. Because by then the British decided we can't hold on to this. The empire can't hold on to India anymore. It's become a very rough country to deal with. And then along comes Mahatma Gandhi and so on. And he took them, and wonderfully so, actually, because you must have a resolution to a conflict. You can't keep on fighting without having a plan to end the conflict. And he did that. He brought the conflict to an end and he got freedom for India. But it was based on the blood of the people of India who fought the British day in and day out in their lives. Now, what I'm advocating is not that, because I speak for non-violence today. But I want our non-violence to be of a more aggressive variety. Don't break the law. Don't take a life. Don't hurt a soul. Don't shed any blood. But the quietness of our non-violence is debilitating. Sitting and discussing, doing seminars and workshops, giving memorandums, taking out a silent procession, all these forms of non-violence are today quite useless in India. Nobody cares. You give whatever memorandum you want to give, signed by 10,000 people, and the minister will take it and put it into his waste paper basket. Therefore, you need non-violent direct action. Take action. Don't expect the police or the administration to help you get your human rights. Take action. That is non-violent, but take action. Like if there's a jail where people have been tortured, go to the jail, chain yourselves to the gate, get your media teams in, resist the arrest peacefully, peacefully. This is just an example. But the time has come for us and the people of India to upgrade their levels of resistance, to make it a little higher than what it used to be. And I must say, sometimes within our community, our levels of protest are very low. Our pace of protests are very slow. And we don't lead. We don't mobilize. We don't agitate. We don't organize. And we don't educate on ways to do struggle which are within the law. We educate generally. Like in my area of work, which is law and human rights, we educate generally. Article so and so says this, and Article 21 says right to life, and so on. Awareness, as we call it, we create awareness, we do awareness. And I so dislike that phrase, we do awareness. Why? Because everyone's aware. When my colleagues say we're going to an area, going to do a seminar, I say, what's the objective? The objective is to make them aware of their rights. And I said, God, how patronizing. And what a superior attitude you have of what you're doing. Because you don't understand that ordinary people know exactly what their rights are. You have a right to life. You can't be raped. You can't be beaten. Your lands can't be taken away from you. You can't be pushed out of the forest. Your slum can't be broken. You have a right to housing. People know their rights. It's so simple. Once we understand that rights are so ingrained in our thinking and our hearts, we don't need to teach rights. Come on. Just because the Adivasi understands rights in a different language using different, terminology and phraseology and so on, doesn't mean she doesn't know it. It's we who don't know that people know their rights. And all you have to do is what they ask you for. I know my right. My right is not to be evicted from the forest. My right is that my slum should not be broken because I have a right to housing. Supreme Court has said it in umpteen judgments. But tell me, you are educated. Tell me, what are the steps I should take to realize my right? In the court, on the streets, battle and legal battle. What are the steps I should take? And people are not asking you then for a lecture on what steps we should take. People are looking at you to teach them by participation in a group. So if tribals are being evicted, they expect you to be in the middle of that eviction, fighting, fighting, fighting. Getting arrested, oh, heaven forbid. Very important part of our learning. Tribals know the repression of the state. Tribals understand, slum dwellers understand, workers understand. We don't know. We don't face. So in a sense, who is the educator? And who is the person being educated is a very important question. And broadly, it's a dynamic relationship between us and them, who face violence every day of their lives, and they pretty well know what the state is, they pretty well know what the police stand for, they pretty well know what the Constitution means, even though they've never read the Constitution or held it in their hands. They understand it beautifully. And so our role then is to participate in struggle. The role of the middle class today, at this turning point in history, is to throw ourselves into struggle. Be among the tribals, be among the slum dwellers, be among the workers and form trade unions and agitate for rights. be among the women's organizations, be among the Dalit rights organizations, be in the disability group struggling for rights, be among the transgender community, be among the ecology groups, the environmental groups. And if you protest against that nuclear power station in the south, in Tamil Nadu, Kudankulam, you know, if you go there and you protest and you go out in the boats and have a rally against the nuclear power station, you can be sure that thousands of you would have cases filed against you for sedition, and you'll be running to the courts for many, many years, going, coming back, going, coming back, going, coming back. These are the consequences of human rights activity. My dear friends, I've gone so over what time-wise, over what I wanted to say and so on, because I should be stopping by about 10 o'clock or so on. But I want to say a few words, because I think you'll have 15 minutes for discussion and so on. And there were so many points, but there's not much time to speak them. Yeah, give me a few minutes. I'll take 3 minutes and then 3 minutes. And then I'll be exactly at my 45-minute mark. I went once, I was going to my parents' home once in Bandra in Mumbai. And I passed a slum that had been burnt down by the landlord. And I was going for a meeting on housing rights, which was being held in a church. And I said, oh, this is interesting. And so when I stood there, they were asking me questions about cooperative societies. How does one transfer my flat to my son? And what is the law like that? And I said to them, I said, coming here, I saw a slum being burnt down, just close to the church itself. Have any of you all been to that slum to find out what happened, to protest against it, to look at rehabilitation and so on? And they said, no. And I said a few uncharitable things there. But the phrase that comes to mind is righteous anger. And I have this image of Jesus actually taking a whip of sorts and, beating the people in the temple for turning the temple into a place of commercial activity. Righteous anger. But that phrase has tremendous importance in today's world. Jesus didn't, he may have gone and, been caught and arrested and crucified. He didn't allow violence. When one of the disciples, pulled out his sword, he said, hold on. But he was also not a pacifist. He was also not going to allow things to happen, even though he was non-violent. He was not going to allow things to happen. And the phrase righteous anger is probably a sort of a guiding light for all of us. That anger is not necessarily a bad thing. Anger against injustice is probably a very good thing. And icy cool thinking is perhaps not a very human quality, but anger combined with compassion will probably show how we can upgrade the level of our participation today. Important, why? Because the country is going to move on a path of liberation. You may see the signs here and there, but you must train yourselves, and all of us must train ourselves to see the sign of people fighting for liberation, like a second national movement, but this time against capitalism and injustice, not just against the white skin. And probably dangerous, which means that your institutions must take a very courageous decision. Don't get into trouble. Don't do anything which will get you into trouble. I've heard that so often. Don't get into trouble. Stay away from trouble. And I want to end with a thing that a judge once told me when I was a young lawyer. He took a liking to me, seeing the kind of cases I was doing, and he called me to his chamber and he told me, "Mr. Gonsalves, I have something to say to you." I said, "Yes, sir." "It's nothing about the cases that you're arguing before me. I have something to say to you. I've been watching you." I said, "Yes, sir." "You are a trouble seeker." So I laughed out aloud because I thought this was the most accurate description of who I was, a trouble seeker. Many will tell you don't get into trouble. I would say a true believer in the faith would say, all of you be trouble seekers. Seek out areas where injustice is done. Stand in front of and protect those under attack. And never have fear in your mind of the consequences of your action, be it arrest or whatever. For that is the true path that God teaches us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Advocate Colin Gonsalves. Your intervention was very thought-provoking and helped us to understand certain issues regarding our country, its laws, the situation of people in a better light. We now to open the floor for anyone who would like to put any queries or clarifications or questions. Please unmute yourself before you speak.
Yes, sir. I would like to start with listening to you. I really admire your courage, sir. And you started with the notes of hope. And you, in fact, the incidents that you narrated at the very beginning of the talk gave me so much of hope. And then later on, even stating the facts, I found that you are so much hopeful. And then you ended with this, that we need to be trouble seekers. So it's my curiosity. I'm asking you because we heard that you have got into trouble many times. And the latest one is that they have called you NGO he's called you as an anti-India activist and accused you that you have received 50 crores from European churches to defend anti-CAA and all. So tell us, we are also frightened of these troubles. So how have you overcome these troubles? What have you done?
See, you are people of the spirit. You are not people amassing wealth and all that kind of stuff. You are people of the spirit. We are all people of the spirit. And the spirit is so strong, is so indomitable. When you think of Christ's suffering, I mean, how can you think of something more terrible, more frightening than to have nails put into you and strung up on a cross? You are people of the spirit. And the spirit is unbreakable. When these allegations were made against me that you've got 50 crores and all that, I looked at it very closely and I looked at my website because we put our annual account. So it's 10 crores a year. So he said 5 years, but he omitted to say 5 years, 50 crores. So I said to myself, everyone said, you must send a defamation notice, you must file a case. I said, why? 50 crores is correct. Over 5 years, 10 crores a year, we get 50 crores, which we spend on legal aid and so on. And everything is spent lawfully and everything is put on the website and everything is sent to the Home Ministry. You must worry only if you have done something which is spiritually wrong. If you've done something spiritually wrong, then it will torment you. It will worry you, torment you. It torments me if I do something wrong, if I treat a client badly, If I've not been diligent in a case and the client has lost the case and the client comes crying, I can't live with myself for days. But if you're spiritually on the right track, as all of you are, laugh at all these things. You know, the trollers are going at all the human rights activists. All the big organizations have had allegations, allegations, allegations. And they come to me and say, should we? I said, don't say a word until they try to really affect you. Don't say a word. Just see, have you made a mistake? If you've not made a mistake, be unafraid. And that's how it works. I'm also afraid. I'm not, not afraid. I'm also afraid. I'm a Supreme Court lawyer and I'm quite reasonably well known, but I'm afraid. I know what power these people have. But if you are people of the spirit, let your spirit dominate you. Let your spirit guide you. Let your fears dissipate. Because your spirit has nothing to be afraid of. And you know that they can do nothing to you. Once the spirit comes together in a huge gathering, and the resistance is the resistance which is spiritual, what can anyone do to you? You've seen so many examples in history. East European countries with tanks and bombs and this and that, secret police and all that. And the people arose in a spiritual uprising. It's never written like that. It's always written that the people of Hungary rose against the tyranny of the East, the Eastern police and so on. Nobody writes it as a spiritual uprising. Or what happened when Indira Gandhi was arrested and the Jai Prakash, Sampurna Kranti, total rebel. It was a spiritual uprising. What's happening in Bihar today is a spiritual uprising. What happened in America is spiritual uprising. And you are trained in the spirit, right? You would understand it immediately that you have nothing to lose and no reason to be afraid of anything. But you must have your spirit be given free rein. Sometimes the spirit is cloistered, covered up with layers. The voice of the spirit is not heard. The challenge is that, not the state and what the state can do to you, because we are not bargaining with the state. We're not interested in your money. We're not interested in your project. We are interested in liberation of spirit. Our spirit must be liberated. Speak boldly. Speak out. And when somebody tells you don't get into trouble, contest that. Why not? If it's not of my making, if the trouble is not of my making, why should I not go to areas where I will get into trouble? Is it not my spiritual duty to do that, to liberate people?
No. I'm following.
If Colin,
Yes.
I'd like to ask you something regarding the state of the country today. Like you compared in the beginning that our two democracies are, in a way, speaking up, and the people are speaking up, etc. But I think there's one big difference between the United States and here. That in the United States, the freedom of the press has not yet been affected very adversely. And secondly, the judiciary is also independent. Then, unfortunately, in India, we know that right from the executive, the administrative, and even the judiciary is compromised. So that is what I would say. It's almost like the last bastion of democracy in India has been compromised. What do we do, or how can we resist in such a situation?
Very good question. Let me answer both. And it's part of what I already said. Journalists are resisting throughout the country. You see, when we say that the bastion has fallen, what we don't recognize is the bastion has not fallen. The soldiers are in the bombarded fort, fighting with their rifles. Still, they have not surrendered spirit. Journalists are fighting throughout the country. Thousands of journalists have been sacked. Thousands of journalists have been transferred. Their families are in penury because they are blacklisted, because you wrote about social issues and so on. Judges have not given up. There are some judges who are very close to the government and sometimes do exactly what the government wants them to do. But there are many who are fighting, delivering courageous judgments, no matter what. They know, I've delivered this judgment today, my chance of a promotion to a session judge, High Court, Supreme Court is over. They got a phone call from a minister who said, please release that man on bail. He said politely, sir, I'll do whatever I have to do according to my duty. Thank you very much, sir. Click. And he passed his judgment. Finished. His career is over. We have so many judges, brilliant, who are rotting in the lower courts, can't come to Supreme Court because of that. Nobody's giving up. Please see the heart of things. Journalists are not giving up. Look at the Wire. Look at the other, internet's exploding. The internet is exploding with genuine news. Look at alt news, which is exposing fake news and so on. In their own world, in their own way, the spirit is emerging. The spirit is asserting itself. People are suffering, no doubt. But there is resistance and we will prevail. You can't answer this. You can't answer people who are fighting you with the spirit, who are not asking you for any favors, who don't care. They've lost their job. They don't care. They're fighting still. Have faith in that. Have faith in the spirit. Have faith that the spirit will never die, never be conquered. It may look going a little quiet, scudding here and there, but it's a very mischievous. The spirit is a very mischievous thing. It scurries from corner to corner looking for space. And it's a very insurgent animal, the spirit. It is always looking to counterattack. Realize that spirit inside you, that it's always looking. The police is coming, this is coming, that is coming, this is happening, that's happening. They burned the churches in Kandamal, they did this, they did that. But the spirit is an insurgent being, always looking for a chance to counterattack. So silence for a moment is not to be interpreted as surrender. Quietness is not to be interpreted as surrender. Not speaking up for a time being is not to be interpreted as surrender. Because the uprisings will come. Look at Father Stan Swami. What a man. What work in these areas. Phenomenal. And he will be acquitted. Gone to jail, fighting all his life. They can't find anything against him, so they took his laptop. And those hackers in the police departments, 21-year-old hackers, very intelligent hackers, put some letters on his computer. That's the latest style. They'll take your computer and then put some letters on it. Backdated letters. That's life in India. That's the nature of the police. That is the terrorism that they speak of. Have no fear. Whatever happens, have no fear. And you all are ideally placed to spread the word. Because you are people of the spirit. You're not interested in the world, the material world around you. So you have nothing to lose. But within you and amongst you, there are people who will tell you, don't get into trouble. So you have to fight among yourselves and see.
We'll take a last question if any of you would like to put it to Advocate Colin.
Yes, Cleo, I would like to ask a question.
Yes, go ahead.
The problem is we have institutions which work with the marginalized. And insofar as we are working in some places, we have managed to make inroads and friends with the government people, and we are ensuring that schemes and everything reach the people. The minute we, in another place, take a stance against the government, then all the works everywhere, because we are major superiors and we are signatories on all the trusts. So they jam all your work. So we have to constantly balance between which is the greater good. Is it worthwhile taking on the government in one particular instance, or is it better to work with the government in many places and ensure that scores of people get the benefits? This is the constant struggle that we have, at least I'm facing.
The answer is both are the greater good. It's a balancing act. The moment you say that working with the government is our paramount or primary concern, then you will make many compromises of a very serious nature. You will see a lot of injustice of a very serious nature, and you will say that to run our institutions and to keep everything intact, we must ignore that. Once you do that, the government internalizes that understanding. They understand. And I think they have an understanding of the Christian community that they will never protest. They have too much to lose. They have land, they have institutions, they have too much to lose. They will not protest. So it has a flowing action. You decide that this is protect this. Therefore, I'll work with them no matter what. I'll work with them, which is good. Please don't misunderstand me. It's very good to protect the institutions. But I said both are for the good. So you have to judicially, you said balancing act, that's a nice word to use. A balancing act between activism and protection. Now, which way will it go? And how will you do it? So that the government understands that you're a good person, you're a collaborating partner, but you're also a vocal, articulate, protesting partner. Once they understand that, then they get used to that. The Christian community, they collaborate with us, but the moment we do something wrong, they speak out and they have a bhuk hartal and they do this and they do that. Once they get used to that, then you've shifted the balance a little. For too long, it has been this way. Namely, that we don't protest because we bring the entire institutions into jeopardy. That's not entirely right. There's another sort of balancing position possible, where the government gets used to activism combined with collaboration. That you're not passive collaborators, but you are collaborators who are articulate on human rights. It's very hard to say where the line should be drawn. But in India, it's gone one way for a very, very long time. And also at the top, you need support, no? And at the top, sometimes that support is not forthcoming. On Kandamal, I saw it, for example. I was so disappointed. I mean, after they burn your churches, attack your, rape a nun, all this, you go and meet the, and then you find that real support is not coming. I mean, it's coming in terms of materials and all that, but that's not the point. It was a communal riot. We should be fighting for rights, not just, So I saw it. I was very disappointed. And it should not happen again, that people take our community for granted, that our community will never fight back. They must see fight back. And collaboration, both.
Would anyone else like to put a question? Another question which I'd like to ask you, Advocate Colin, is the fact that, this at present, one of the loudest, what you can say, mouthpieces of the fascist regime is himself in jail. But not because actually the law has taken its course. It's just because one political party is trying to sort of, hold out against another political party. So finally, it doesn't look as if the law or the judges or the judiciary is taking a call on how cases should proceed, but it looks as if the political masters are having their way. The same thing goes also for all these human rights activists, no? Father Stan Swami, Mrs. Bhardwaj. So many of these guys are all Arun Ferrai and company. They are all in jail, and they are rotting over there for the last 3 years. Whereas any guy who is affiliated to the Hindutva parties, they get out for serious crimes on bail within a day or two.
Well, I must tell you that a lot of litigation, for example, since I do public interest litigation and all that, a lot of resistance, mobilizing, organizing, speaking out, putting articles in the press, going online and mobilizing and so on, including public interest litigation, is happening at the grassroots also. It's again something that, since we're under attack, we have to do it in a different way. But make no mistake about it, it's going on everywhere. And I would advocate to all of you who are working among the poor, you don't really have to be the person doing the public interest litigation. You only have to be the conduit for information. We have centers right across the country. We have human rights law centers right across the country. And let's say you're working with a Dalit community and their houses have been burnt, let's say, right? And by, let's say, the communal party, let's say, which has government support, even if you were to collect that information and give that information to us or to any of the groups working in that area, we could use that information and do a public interest case without you being involved at all. So there are many, many ways. It's like an insurgent approach, like the spirit is insurgent. Okay, you can't come directly because you have an institution, but there are many institutions, I must tell you, many institutions from which we get information that this is happening in this tribal area, this is happening in this area, this is happening among migrant workers, this has happened to trafficked women. You give us the information and we take it and we do it in our names or the names of some NGO. So lots of work is possible. Keep hope. I'm very optimistic. I tell you, I'm very optimistic because I enjoy causing causing discomfort to a tyrant. I enjoy this. I'm like a little mosquito. Who am I after all? Compared to the mighty state. But I always say, we are like little mosquitoes. We keep biting at the tyrant in the hope that one day we'll give him malaria and he'll be, sent to hospital. So it's like that. I'm very hopeful, not only in our numbers, but in our strengths. It's just that we are a little frightened, a little overawed. But that's the new normal now. Terror against people doing perfectly legitimate and lawful things, state terror against them is the new normal. So you have to learn to live with that. And resistance is upcoming. So that's the new normal. So identify it in your areas, how people are fighting. If you're in Jharkhand and you saw that movement, for tribal autonomy, it's sedition, they said, because you say, I don't want your Aadhaar card, I don't want your ration shop, I don't want your education. You keep everything. I want tribal autonomy. What was the phrase they used there in Jharkhand? They used a particular phrase which I can't remember now.
It was Jameen, Jal, and something else.
No. It's
Jungle, Jameen, or Jal. 3J.
No, something else. Anyway,
okay.
So it's a new normal that people are going to resist. Is the new normal that the state is going to increase its violence? Is the new normal that you will be not left to live in peace? Is the new normal. Therefore, that you have to live your activism at 2 or 3 notches higher is the new normal. And you'll see the change after that. You'll see the change.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to request Sister Nancy on behalf of all of us to offer the vote of thanks. Sister Nancy, please unmute yourself.
Yes.
Yes.
So Colin, sir, we are at the end of this very challenging moments that you have put us through in a very simple way. You have put the political situation before us. You have given us a perspective of what is happening. And I think that's what we need, this whole big picture. And invited us to respond to it. You've also clarified some concepts, like sedition. I thought I knew the meaning of sedition, but now it became clear for me. Even this whole concept of trickle-down economies has become clearer. So you have clarified things for us, but above all, you have challenged us. So on behalf of all of us present here, as well as on behalf of all the religious of this Western region, who we are advocates for the poor. So we say that's how we see ourselves. But I think we need to take our ministry several notches higher. You have invited us, challenged us to this, to move out of this, setback, non-violence, to upgrade our level of resistance. I thank you for putting before us this image of Jesus driving out the merchants. So it's an activist. We see Jesus there as the activist. Jesus with righteous anger. I think you have urged us to move out from being trouble evaders to trouble seekers, and I think you are modeling that for us, and for that we look up to you. I think as religious, we have to make this shift from the safety of the cloister to resisting or taking up to rise up on behalf of the poor, which is what we want to be. So Colin sir, thank you for showing us the way. And thank you for modeling that for us. On behalf of all of us here, namaste and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister Nancy. And thank you once again, Advocate Colin. We were delighted to have you with us. We hope to come back to you on several occasions because you have inspired us and we need your guidance from time to time. Thank you once again.
Some of them want